Okay, if you guys could please download the data from today's folder in the Teams Drive. I am giving you the analysis folder again, just to make life easier. But like I said last week, we're gonna revisit some of those tools in a different way today. I gave you a couple of handouts. One will help with your homework, one is homework, and one is the tool we're gonna go over today. Select by locations is what we're going to take a look at today. And some of the selection options. So when you get those downloaded, go ahead and open up a new blank ArcMap and add the shapefiles Montana, US rivers, US streams, Montana counties, and Silverboe County. That's basically everything except Montana streams that's in that folder outside of analysis tools. Oh. Looks like there's multiple copies of US rivers. We only need one. All right, first off, US rivers is the file we want to work with. But we're getting an unknown spatial reference error. What do you do with this? We need to use this file today, but it doesn't have a spatial reference, so we can't use it until we assign a spatial reference. What do we do? Yes, thank you. All right. We just saved you from putting that on your second quiz. Define the projection on that one. It is NAD 1983, a geographic coordinate system. You can do that either by assigning the coordinate system through define project, or you can go into the ARC catalog and actually edit that. So that's US rivers properties, and then NAD 83, which is under geographic coordinate systems, North America, USA and territories, and just plain NAD 1983. Now that you've done that, US rivers should show up on your map. Okay, so our goal today is to get to this tool using select by location. I gave you a big long handout on that, but honestly, most of that handout is just pictures for describing all of the tools that are in select by location, and they're pretty self-explanatory, so I don't expect you to go through that word by word or anything, but select by attributes, which we're going to talk about on Thursday, is a little more complex. And so we're going to spend a little bit more time on that one, but select by locations is just what it sounds like. It allows you to select by features on your map. What I want to do is actually just talk about first the selection options. This is hearkening back to the beginning of the class. We have a couple of different options here under selection. We have 4 interactive selection methods: create a new selection, add to a current selection, remove from current selection, and select from current selection. These are going to come in pretty handy here. We need to pay attention to these because as we go through today, we're going to actually make our selections based on these different options. But first, let's go into the selection options. We've just been operating on the default selection options, and we're not going to change that today, but I want you to be aware that you can change that. Including this bright blue color that has always come up as our selection color. We've always used that, and you kind of get to recognize that neon blue as your selection color unless you change it. Our default is always, when we grab something with our selection options, select features partially or completely within the box or graphic. So what that means is, when you go to select something using your selection tool over here, we have these different options, but we've been defaulting to select by a rectangle. So when you drag a box, everything inside that box and on the border of that box is selected. Everything that touches. We also have select by a polygon if a rectangle doesn't work for you. Each left click will put down a point and it will select everything within that polygon. Double click will finish that. I showed you last class, this is a different way of viewing what's in your table of contents. This is your selection menu over here, list by selection. Anything that is not selected shows up as 0, and all of the features that have been selected within the ones that are selected when you do this will show up. So I have a count of 10,506 selected US streams within my polygon. You can also select by circle or line. Just kind of left click, hold down and drag that circle. It'll draw a perfect circle for you and everything that falls within that. And select by line is great if you're like trying to follow a road and looking for features along that road or that stream or something like that. Anything that intersects that line, again, one click will put down a point, double click will finish that drawing for you. I'm gonna zoom in to use the lasso. Lasso is effectively a freehand drawing. So if I'm looking at, say, and I'm going to clear my features here. If I'm looking at trying to grab something very specific and looking at drawing, say, around a drainage or something, and I want to follow a river or just kind of pick out a feature, all you do is left click and hold down to draw that kind of lasso, freehand that in there, and it'll pick up anything you grab. Now notice each time I do this, each time I grab a new selection, it's deleting what I selected before. That's because right now my default selection is to create a new selection. If I add to my current selection, change that, every time I draw a new selection, it's going to keep the old one and add to it. So pay attention to what you have set. This is pretty important. You can also select from the current selection. So if I wanted to drag a new lasso, I can pick out of that. You can also, well, that's not going to work. You can also remove from the current selection. So say I want to pull that little piece out in the middle. Draw within that. So these are our selection methods, our 4 selection methods, hint, hint, 4 selection methods that we are going to use as we go through the next 2 classes using select by attributes and select by location. Let's go back into the selection methods just to point out, the selection options, just to point out why this is working out this way. So we've been selecting features just as a default that are partially or completely within the box. If you're looking for something that's completely within the graphics, as in it excludes the boundary, you can change your selection method here. Say only things that fall completely within my drawing area are going to be picked up, nothing that hits the boundary. It has to be entirely inside that area, but only if I pay attention to my selection method and put it back on create a new selection. Come on. All right, so you can kind of see the difference here when I draw that area. It's not going to pick up anything that crosses the boundary. It has to be entirely inside. Lastly, selecting features that are complete, your graphic is completely within a feature. So in this case, the only thing I can really use here is Montana, but say I want to select something inside Montana, it's saying instead my graphic is entirely within that area. So the only thing it can pick up here is Montana, because the rest of my files are lines, but only what's inside. Did I not set that? Did not set that. So when I draw my graphic, it's looking for anything that contains my graphic. Instead of picking up what's inside my graphic, in this case, it's looking for any of the shape files that actually contain my graphic. Does that make sense? All right, so we have a pixel tolerance of 3 pixels, which basically means we are looking at a really, really narrow margin. Anywhere I put my pointer down, it's going to go within 3 pixels of that. You can set that tighter or looser, however you want to do it. And our default here has been clear the invisible layers. We're not going to play with that. Just leave that alone, but be aware that if you are actually selecting something and it's not checked on your map, it's still there, and its default is to remove that when you're not using it. We're not setting reference scales, so we'll leave that alone. This is one you're going to run into for sure, especially when you get into larger files. The default threshold is 2000. That's a little bit low. All that means is when you select more than 2,000 files, if I selected out of these US streams, I ended up with more than 2,000 US streams, I would get an error message saying, just so you know, this process might take a little while because you got a whole lot of files here. It's going to be over 2,000. If you want to set that higher, you probably won't see that message very often, but 2,000 is your default. And I have taught you guys to export anything you selected, and it will only export what you have selected. That's because this little checkbox is your default. When you export those files, you're saving only what you have selected instead of saving the entire new file. Okay, so basically those are your options here with setting the selection. And back in here, over in the list by selection, you can decide what is selectable or not. You can decide if you want these to not be selectable by left clicking on the icon here to tell it whether or not you want to be able to select those features or not. I'm just going to make sure I didn't change all of my default settings. I'm going to set my default, my options back to the default. If you were following along with that, go ahead and set your options back to the originals. 2000 record count, save layers with their current selections, clear selections, and select features partially or completely. And I'm going to set my selection method back to create a new selection. This isn't a default tool, but I want to show you guys this because it actually comes in handy when we get into this. We're going to add a tool to our selection menu that is not a default tool, but is actually pretty handy. Go into Customize mode. Go into Commands. And look for Selection. Highlight Selection in your categories. There's a tool called Set Selectable Layers that comes in handy when you're trying to fool around with this. This tool right here, when you find it in your list, Set Selectable Layers, left click, hold it down, and drag that thing up and drop it in your selection menu. It'll allow you to put it wherever you want. You can put it in here. And now you have this tool to turn off or on any of the files in your map. If you want to say, I only want to select from US streams and US rivers, I can check only those two. That way, when I drag my selection method on my map, I'm only selecting US streams and rivers. The other 3 files are not selectable. It comes in handy when you've got a bunch of stuff on your map and you're trying to limit what you end up picking up. I'm going to leave them all selectable right now. Having trouble dragging it?
Left click, hold it down and pull it. There we go. Okay, so it looks like it's dropped somewhere, but let's put it, if you hover over that selection, yeah, and just drop it in there somewhere where we just find it. Okay. So now you've got it. down and sits in your onion. Now when you open it up. Anybody else having trouble getting that tool? Are you okay, Sal? Did you get it?
Yeah.
There are a lot of tools that aren't defaulting into this. This is one of the ones that I find especially handy.
I'm sorry, I'm actually getting such selectable layers.
Okay, so left click drag over it, hover over selection before you let it go. Now drag it down into that list wherever you want. There you go.
So in addition to just grabbing a tool you may find useful, you just learned how to find tools that may not be listed in the default. There's a lot of tools in there. That's the only one I'm going to give you this semester, but if you're looking for something, you can find it online, but it doesn't show up, go into that customize mode and see if you can find it. All right, so let's look at select by location. Just like everything else, we have two different options. We have our spatial attributes and our map, and we have our aspatial attributes, our attributes. So today we're going to look at selecting features from our map based on their spatial attributes. This tool, select by location, is what we're going to play with today. We have a fairly limited list right now, so we're going to stick with this. But I want to show you, you still have your 4 selection methods here. And down here, we're essentially querying our data based on this list of queries. There's a couple in there that don't show up. You kind of have to scroll around to see them. What we do is we ask our data to select features from our list that intersect the source layer feature or whatever is listed here, and give it the selection criteria by the source layer. Okay? So I'm looking at, let's say I want to select US rivers that are within Montana. So I'm going to say US rivers is the target layer I want to check. They are within the source layer feature, and the source layer feature is Montana. So you want to read this as select features from US rivers that are within the source layer feature of Montana. Okay, it's a little counterintuitive to read it backwards. But remember, I'm selecting features from, which means I'm creating a new selection. These are my 4 different selection methods, but if I do that, if I leave it on the default select features from, this is effectively creating a new selection. Say apply, and if you want to look at your attributes, you can see what is actually selected. It looks like I've got 1,142 rivers selected, but you can see them on the map. Everything within Montana was selected here. So I'm going to go through a couple, yeah, sorry.
Why is yours like mine's like showing?
It's showing. Hang on, let me drag it there.
Are you looking at the attribute table?
I'm not right there. Under apply search distance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mine's like not clicked.
Okay.
Well, it is, but it's like not.
Well, let me look at it.
Sorry, I know
We'll talk about that. We will actually use that today. We'll get to that.
Let's see.
I just noticed I didn't click apply.
Okay. The reason it's doing that is because you are asking it for a distance. It says within a distance of the source layer feature. So in that case, it automatically wants to use that.
Are like in this source.
Yes. So now you can uncheck apply search distance. That work. Let's see what your selection is. Let's try that again with your selection. So search. Okay, so unselect Montana.
So
We want to set that one right there to Montana. And then are within the source layer feature. Yep.
Your selection.
So it looks like,
So I'll go back to your orders.
so like, no, we're not going to use that. Bring your US rivers to the top of your map because I think they're just obscure. So let's try that selection again. This.
So
US
that's
rivers
clear.
are within the source layer feature.
So you're selecting
Okay. So let me see your set selectable layers.
So when you get apply,
The tool we just added.
your rivers will select.
Why is it just-
Select
and they're
apply.
like not.
Okay,
Yours
so
are wrong.
I don't know why it's-
No.
Yeah, Yeah.
Well, they're showing up on their screen. I don't know. If you're in the right, did you project it or define project? Okay, good. And you're fine. I don't think you did anything wrong there.
Okay, yeah, I'm still there. So you must have Montana, in the source area feature.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
I'm right, I'm in the source area feature? Yeah. Your turn? I don't know. Selection. Selection.
Oh, sorry.
In source area feature. Okay.
I gotcha.
And if I go check here. No. I just changed my US. So it was, so maybe that's. But yeah, no, I've never changed that. I'm gonna.
Okay, I don't know what was happening. It was being stupid. I don't know what was going on, but you were doing that right.
I don't know. It was there. What happened? It went away. So,
You lost your selection tool.
I know.
I don't think I've ever seen it. Oh, well, customize. Toolbars, selection. Okay, so which tool is it all? Hey, the tools toolbar? No, it's
Here
not.
it is.
What?
Oh, okay. Okay, so let's go to selection. Set selectable layers. Nothing's allowed to be selected, so select all. There we go. Now try.
Jesus.
So you just turned it off until it.
So
not to let it select it.
this is this. At least my thing's back on though.
Yeah,
Did I do something?
I have no idea. If you did, Dave did too. I seriously doubt you guys did the same thing. I think the computer's just failing.
Okay.
All right, so what's that?
So.
Fine, it's not your fault. You know what was happening.
Oops. My bad. I'll catch it.
No, I'm gonna wait for you because this one's hard to catch up.
This is what's going
I didn't have a name for the filter, it was just a analysis tool, just a name. Charge GIS. So let's see, that looks like you added a new scheme.
I have it over here. So.
Added GIS. Yeah, we're there. So just bring everything except the two copy files. All right, once you have added that set by selectable layers to your map here, you'll get this each time you come up unless you remove it. But if you work on a different computer, you're going to need to grab that again. I think you're good. Oh, you need counts. You already did that, so it retains that information. It remembers that. Yep.
Okay.
So just bring the counties in and select by location. Okay, now I don't know why it wasn't selecting for you. We're doing everything right. We really have that issue. Okay. So I'm going to go through this list. This is a little bit tedious, but it's fairly important to understand what's in the option list. All right, first option, intersect the source layer feature. Now remember, when we talk about this, your source layer is the one you select here. It's not what you select from, it's what you use as the selection criteria to select from your target layer. So if I say intersect the source layer feature, I'm asking for anything from my target layers that intersects my source layer feature. We're not going to do anything 3D in this class, but you have that three-dimensional option. You can apply Z values when you add data. So if you did choose to get into that, especially with your final projects, you do have this option. Are within a distance of the source layer feature. I'm going to turn that one on. This is something Ashley pointed out. When this happens, it automatically turns on your apply a search distance. Excuse me. Because you are telling it you want to query within a distance. So it's asking you specifically for a distance. You have all the units, you have all the ability to change that, but this is actually specifically asking for a distance. Again, distance with 3 dimensions. Contain the source layer and completely contain are the pretty key difference here is that the boundary is not contained. If you say contain, it's assuming that the boundary is part of the file that you want to select from. So in that case, say I want to select from Montana, anything or select anything that intersects Montana, it's going to include that boundary. If I say I want US rivers that are completely contained, I guess I can just show you. I'm going to say US rivers that are contained in Montana. Oh, I have to turn off my search distance. Am I doing this backwards? I'm doing this one backwards. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. Okay, so anything that's contained includes the boundary. Anything that's completely contained does not cross the boundary. Oh, that's not a good one. It's not showing the example because the edges are so small on this one, you can't see it at this scale, but any part of that river segment that crosses the boundary of Montana will not be selected in this case. Clementi,
So if you did like, say counties, for example, you did contain the select board of counties.
That's a good one. That is a very good one. Actually, I think that was on my list of ones to look at, so I'm going to go ahead and use that as an example. Clear my selection. Okay, so select features from Montana counties that, I guess in this case I need to say are within the source layer. Are within and are completely within are the same. We're saying contain versus completely contain. It's the inverse relationship here. So let's say Montana counties that are within the source layer feature. Apply that includes every single county in Montana. Okay. When I say are completely within the source layer feature, it's going to only select the ones that do not cross the boundary. So that was an excellent example. I think I can switch this and say Montana counties and do that backwards. Yeah, so completely contain versus contain. Still not working right. Okay, that's a bad example. Ignore that example. Clementi, again, vice versa, contain versus are within. Clementi basically separates the boundary from the inside and the outside. It treats the boundary as if it was a separate feature. I have never, in 20 years of playing with GIS, used Clementi feature. I do not expect you guys to use that. It seems like a fairly silly option, and I'm pretty sure it's actually going away in the new version of Arc Pro. But be aware that it's there if you have any reason to use it. So contain, completely contain, are within, and are completely within. Completely just means it includes the boundary. Are identical to the source layer feature. In this case, streams and rivers are identical. There are places where the streams and the rivers overlap. So I can say US streams are identical to US rivers. And it should end up selecting essentially what looks like US rivers, because I think the US rivers files was actually created from the streams file. But this is where it overlaps. It has to completely overlap. Touch the boundary of the source layer feature. Effectively, this is using that Clementi. If I want to look at this as we just did the counties, instead of looking at our completely within, maybe we want to look at the ones that touch the boundary of Montana state. That's going to select all of the counties. All of the counties that touch the boundary of Montana. That's the inverse of the ones that are completely contained within Montana, okay? Share a line segment with the source layer feature. This is going to be similar to that rivers and streams, the places where they overlap. Remember, each of these lines is made up of individual segments. When we were drawing shape files, we looked at that. What we effectively do with segments, my drawing tool, I'm going to draw a line. Every time I put a point down, when I draw a line, I create a segment. So the same thing applies to these shape files. When these are being drawn, every time you put a vortex, I think it's a vortex down. Every time you put one down, you're creating a line segment. So anywhere that US streams or rivers overlaps here, but not here, it's going to collect that and select that because it touches the boundary of the source layer feature, or shares a line segment, sorry. Our crossed by the outline of the source layer feature is effectively the inverse of the touch the boundary and have their centroid. And again, the centroid, just like the line segments, when we create a line segment, the very center of that line, the very center of that polygon or the point, which by default is a centroid, wherever that happens to fall along that line, if it's inside or outside, it's going to be selected by the centroid. Okay, so let's do a couple of these. I'm going to tell you as we go along, and we're going to do a couple of selections and use this. I'm going to tell you to clear your selections. If I don't tell you to clear your selections, we're going to keep going with that current selection. So if you get behind, feel free to speak up. We can always come back to that and delete this thing. I'm so used to drawing on the board, it's hard to draw on this computer. Okay, so select features from US streams that are crossed by the outline of the source layer Montana, and tell me how many there are. Select features from US streams that are crossed by the outline of the source layer Montana. How many are there? I got 163. Did you say 363?
100.
Oh, perfect. Okay, good. Okay. All right, bad news, guys. I know your names now. So those of you who don't speak up are going to get called on. You better be doing this. So clear your selection. Select features from US streams that are within the source layer of Montana. Anybody but John, tell me how many you got.
About 6,000.
It's a little high.
5,187.
Perfect. Thank you, Ren. Excellent. Oh, Shit, sorry, I lost my mouse. Mouse dropped off in the. Okay. Anybody struggling with how to do that? Ashley?
It says 0 everything, like they're selected.
Yeah, they're selected. They're not like me. I like my attribute.
Well, you get her.
So-
Oh, dude,
This is my selection.
that's so
Right
nice.
there.
You'll find this out. That's so awesome.
So if
I
you
have to look through
go
that
here,
list.
this
I
one looks
tried
my
finding
selection.
it in the list, you know, like when you have highlight tables.
Oh, that's the one.
Now it's
Then it
not
gives you the
showing.
number. That's it there.
That's nice.
All right, John's jumping the gun on me, so I'm gonna show you this now.
Thanks, John.
You don't have to open your attribute table. I did show you this earlier and pointed out that however many are selected will show up. If you want to bounce back and forth over here, more power to you. That's terrific. It's a lot easier than going through the attribute table. But this will show you from the selected items, you've only selected US streams, you have 5,187 items selected.
My attribute table says 0, but good and bad.
That's weird. These computers come up with the craziest issues. Can I look at it?
I'm just doing that.
That's why I was just.
Excellent observation.
So yeah, when I open my attribute table, it's like,
So you're in US Rivers. Just open the attribute on. Yeah, you got US stream selected, so you're looking at the one that wasn't selected.
oh, dude. Sure, sure.
Sorry.
Easy to do. It's fine.
Just
You
sure.
do.
Thank you. You guys can work out.
Okay, let's see. Where were we? All right, so don't clear that selection. Using one of your selection methods, add to the current selection number 1 and number 2, which was US streams that crossed the outline of Montana. So we said US streams that are within the source layer feature of Montana and crossed the boundary of Montana or crossed the outline. So how would you do that if you wanted to combine those? Not John, not Rin. Liam, how would you do that?
Want ones that cross it and are also.
Yeah, we want to combine those two. We've got one selected. We want to add to the selection the other one. Jasmine? Exactly. Add to the currently selected method. So we can actually, instead of going all the way out of, both will work. We can actually do it right there in the selection method instead of going all the way out to selection, interactive selection method and add to current selection. We're talking back and forth between the map and this tool, so both will work, but it's right there at the top of your menu. So we want to add those two together. I think I was on the previous one, so what did you end up adding those two together? 5,350. So that was the original 163 and the additional 5,187. All right, well, remove from the current selection now US streams that share a line segment with US rivers. Remove from the current selection US streams that share a line segment with US rivers. Tell me how many you got, Tyler.
That was 350.
You got how many?
Not the right one.
5,350 was the last one. So it sounds like you're still on the last one now. Remove from the current selection
Right.
US streams that share a segment with rivers.
Oh.
So could you ever get into a situation where we double count things that you can keep adding selections?
No, because there's only one single attribute, you can't duplicate that attribute and add it again. So you're still selecting that one, but you can, if you say, I want to add this over and over and over again, it'll just keep adding that one as a single item instead of adding one plus one plus one. Does that make sense?
That's okay.
So it doesn't multiply. It just, if it either meets the criteria or it doesn't, so it stays in or it goes.
That was a good question. This will not iteratively add items because there is only one attribute in that list. So even if you make 6 different queries, if that one attribute meets that query all 6 times, it's not going to add 6 items. It's just going to be one item that met all 6 criteria. So you're not going to get into a iterative loop of adding and adding and adding the same piece of criteria. Did you get that to work?
Intersect.
Source this line. Share line segment. Share line segment.
So we're still in Montana right now, on US rivers. So you should have 4,000. Here's 4,282. Okay, yeah, good.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I still know their deflections. That's a good question.
I like trying.
Let's see, I think it was, we used to be nice.
Okay, yeah, look how close that is. That's dangerous.
I know. That kind of thing all the
Oh
time.
my
All
God.
right, so we want US streams
Yeah.
that cross the outline.
US
Selection. Streams. So now we want to remove from current selection US streams that share a border with US rivers. Share a line segment. 4,282. Perfect. Yeah, you're good. You're all set. Okay. Everybody comfortable with this?
All right, let's see what's next. Okay, so let's add back into the selection US streams that share a segment with US rivers. Add that back into your selection. Tell me why we don't get 5,350. Grant. I want you to add to the current selected features US streams that intersect the line segment with US rivers. So we just removed items that crossed where the line segment crossed US streams and US rivers. Now we're adding them back in. Why did we get more than the previous 5,350?
The $1 across the country.
Yes. In this case, we stopped where our original selection was limited to Montana. So we removed those. Now when we go back and add them back in, we're getting the entire country because there are line segments that cross outside of Montana. We didn't specify to keep it in Montana this time. Are you guys following how this kind of query process works? In and out and being very specific about how you query. All right, clear your selection. Select from US streams that intersect Montana. And you're going to need this for your homework, so make sure you do it. Select features from US streams that intersect the source layer of Montana. We're back to that 5,350 with this one, because what we did was we used one tool to select anything that crossed the boundary of Montana and fell within Montana. Okay, so intersect includes both of those criteria. Hits the boundary and is within Montana because it intersects. So we're back to that 5,350. Just a minute ago, I had you remove from this anything that intersected the streams and rivers. Okay? Because your default, and maybe check since we were looking at it, your default selection option should be save layers with their current selections. If it remains save layers with your current selections, export this file and save it for your homework. You're going to need this for your homework. That would be a good idea unless you want to do it later. I mean, it's fine with me. But right now you have me here saying you should have 5,350. And if you don't, you should make me check on why. Does anybody need me to go over how to export that? I'm sorry?
Export rivers file.
I think this one's the streams file. Does your homework say rivers? It should say streams. Okay. Oh. I printed this from a previous year, and I'm sorry, but I could not find my textbook today to verify that these are the correct page numbers for this assignment, but whatever chapter is about select by location and select by attributes is the chapter you should be reading for this assignment, not necessarily the correct page. So I don't know if this was actually version 8 of our textbook, because I think my textbook must be at home, but just, you might want to write that across the top of your homework. I'll send everybody an email about it, but don't necessarily count on those being the correct pages. I'll verify that as soon as I get home tonight. So the last question on your homework was, use the US streams file that intersect Montana you created in class and Silverboe County to remove the streams within Silverboe County. You can do that either using the tool that was part of the homework to answer, or you can do that using select by locations. But if you have this exported, does anybody need me to go over how to export it? You remember how to do that? Okay, good. All right, tell me how many US streams have their centroid in Montana? How many of those streams, how many US streams have their centroid in Montana?
5,200.
Very good. 5,282. US streams that have their centroid in Montana. Yep, select current. Do this to myself every time. 5,282. All right, now select features from Montana counties. Well, I guess we already did this one because John jumped the gun on me. How many counties are there that fall within, completely within Montana? How many counties? Because I had you do it, but we didn't count them. How many counties are completely within Montana?
56.
I think that's probably just within. I want completely within.
I got you.
What's the difference? Jasmine, what's the difference between completely within and within?
Within the border and completely within.
Perfect.
Which brings it down to 29.
29, excellent. Thank you, Liam. All right, so now I've got a hard one for you that we're gonna have to actually think our way through. Clear your selection. I want to select by attribute. Silverbow County is my target layer. Montana Counties is my source layer. There are 3 options here, spatial selection methods, that will not select Silverbow County, excluding the Clemente options. 3 options here will not select Silverbow County. The rest of them will select Silverbow County with this selection options. What are the 3?
Are crossed by the outline.
Yes. Because the outline does not cross the boundary of Montana. That's one of them. Excellent. Good job, Gabe. What are the other 2?
Contain the source layer feature.
Yes. Because there is still a county line inside there that overlaps Silverbow County. Yeah, that actually wasn't the one I was going for, but contain should not have picked it up. It kind of depends on whether it recognizes the interior, but I'm going to give you points for that one because it did it both ways on me upstairs on the same computer, so. It's actually are completely within. Are completely within, completely contain, and are crossed by the outline. You guys follow why that works? I could let you sit here and go through the whole list, but I think I'm not seeing too many heads shaking on this one. This one seems like you're following it. All right, so clear out your map. Start a new blank map. We don't need to save that one, although I would save that one file. Last Monday, we used analysis tools. We went through multiple iterative steps and multiple iterative tools to answer questions that we can now answer with select by locations with just a couple of clicks, right? Remember merge, buffer, all of that. Add into your map the analysis tools from last class. I gave them to you today. They're in this folder, analysis tools. Go ahead and add those into your map. The one thing we need to do here that we still have to do the analysis with is the merge. You can do this individually on each of these files, but it's a lot faster if you just merge them into one. So merge those 3 mine files, unknown, placer, and load, into one file that we can query spatially. Remember where the merge tool was? Grady? Start with the obvious toolbox, right? Data management tools, because this was kind of a trick question. This one was the only one that wasn't an analysis tool. Right? I can't remember if it's general or generalization, honestly, so I just open them both and figure out which one it is, but it's in there somewhere. Oh, looks like it's general. Merge those 3 mine files for me. Don't click on your map until it's completely finished. We want this to actually work so that we get the same numbers. If you click on it too fast, it might halt your merge before it's done. End up giving you a different number. These computers just don't have the processing power for us to be getting ahead of them. Once you have those three merged, we don't need these anymore. We can query just the merge. But what I asked you last class was how many mines are within Silverbow County? Do that without using the analysis tools. How many mines are within Silverbow County?
Doing the same thing.
What on earth?
Do you know how many in the target layers? Okay, so.
Well, that's- I have no idea why that's happening.
Yours works.
Okay, well, I'm gonna open a new instance because I don't know what the hell's going on with that. That's really strange. If anybody from IT ever actually looks at these videos from this class, they're gonna be so mad at me for bad mouthing these computers, but they are just absolutely shit computers. I've told them so many times, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, I should have done.
Okay, I don't know why that worked, but all I did was create a new instance and drag those in. Something hung my computer up and it sounded like I wasn't the only one. Your merged file still exists. You created it, you don't have to run the merge again. Trick is, do you remember where you put it? I didn't pay any attention, so I usually, when I'm not gonna use it again, I leave it in my default geodatabase, which I treat like a temporary folder because I never go back in there and pull anything out. I'm not sure if that is actually linked. Does not look like we have database connections. Oh, no, here we go. Okay. If you go into Art Catalog under Home, your default geodatabase should have your merged file in it if you didn't specify a different location. You can see I just dumped a whole bunch of stuff in here along the way. Mine was called Unknown Merge, I believe. Yeah, Unknown Merge. So if you didn't change anything on yours, it should be in the same location. The takeaway here is do as I say, not as I do. Pay attention to your file structures. Pay attention to where you put things. All right, so back to selection. What I want to know is how many mines are in Silverbow County? How many did you get?
381.
Excellent, good job. Everybody get 381? Outstanding. How many of those are within 2 miles of streams? This is buffer. We created a buffer around the streams and then selected within 2 miles of streams. We selected features that were within, I think we actually clipped to that buffer using the analysis tools last time. Excellent. Everybody get 79? Select from the currently selected features. Oh, I didn't set my source layer to streams. Select from the currently selected features within 2 miles, not 200,000. Oh, I set that to 2.
Why is the box not highlighted? Does it matter?
Why is the what?
The box not highlighted? Why? Is it just assumed that can't unclick that?
If you're using this tool that specifies you have to use a distance, then yes, it defaults to the distance box. You can't uncheck that. Not for that tool. That tool requires a distance. All right. How many are within 3 miles of highways? Including the 2 miles from the streams. I want how many are within 2 miles from the streams and within 3 miles from the highways? Are you struggling?
Maybe. See what you got.
What was the answer?
The answer, the way I phrased it, was 2,200. Why? We stopped specifying Silver Bow County. Our first query was Silver Bow County, but if I wanted to know how many were specifically within 2 miles of the streams, within 3 miles of the highways, and in Silver Bow County, I ordered my query in the wrong direction. You start with how many are within this distance of the streams, add how many are within this distance of the highway, and then what's next to get it down to Silver Bow County. Now select from this selection those that are within Silver Bow County and hold that. Don't clear that selection. So in this case, because we did it in the wrong order, we've got to ask it twice. How many are within Silver Bow County? Without a search distance. So we used 6 different tools last Monday to go through iterative steps to get to this point, which we just did in about a dozen clicks. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with using those analysis tools. Those tools are terrific. This is a better tool if this is your end result. What you want to do with your data kind of dictates which tool you want to use. Okay, so leave these selected. I want to ask one more thing. This is going to throw you back a little bit again. Going back, I want to know how many of these are within Butte city limits, quote unquote. I say that because Butte is technically Butte Silver Bow Incorporated. So what I want to know is if I zoom in on Silver Bow County, I bring in my nape layer, everybody's favorite. I'm going to make Silver Bow County hollow so I can actually see the nape layer. Uncheck this, but don't unselect it so you can see the map. Oh, it's not going to let me do that. There it is. Okay. So your features remain selected while they're invisible. They're still selected. You can verify that by looking at your selection option. I still have 381 and I had an intermediate step. It should have been 278. So if you have 278, you did good. I accidentally clicked the wrong thing, so I have more than I'm supposed to. Anyway, what I want to know is if I zoom in on Butte, there's obviously an area pretty well populated. Let's assume we're going to a mine shaft or we're going to go look at these mines. They are sealed off in town, I guarantee it. I want to remove those from my map. Using my select by location, how would I do that? Creative processes here. Using a tool you know how to use and have used in the past in this class. You could.
You could draw a perimeter around there, remove them from the current selection. I hadn't even thought of that, honestly. I would have drawn a new shapefile and removed them. So what I want you to do, although lasso will work, this is mainly to make you do this again because repetition is good for you. Create a new Polygon shapefile, draw it in there, and remove anything within that shapefile from your selection. Okay? Pick a folder to put it in, new shapefile. It's got to be a polygon if we're going to remove inside it. I'm just going to call it Butte, give it a coordinate system. So I have a new shapefile over here. What do I do with that shapefile to populate it? I want to draw something in there. Give that shapefile some shape. Start editing, excellent. Thank you, Ashley. I want to start editing. If your Create Features menu did not pop up, go back to Editor, Editing Windows, Create Features. Select Butte, and you can use whichever tool you want. I'm going to draw a rectangle, or actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to draw a polygon, not a rectangle. Approximately around Butte. Areas that are most likely to be closed off to the public. Finish that sketch by double clicking, stop editing, and save your edits. Okay, and I realize everybody's going to have a different number for this one because everybody drew a different shape. But now, I still have mine selected, or I should have. Oh, I cleared them. Cleared them because I started editing. Well, I wanted to remove them from selection. I'm sorry, I forgot it. Clears your selection when you start editing. It won't hold them. Okay, good lesson. Do that first. Are you guys comfortable with this? You understand how this kind of spatial query works? So I'm going to show you this, but this is really next class's assignment. This is the spatial query where we talk to the map and ask it questions about where something's located on the map. Our attribute table has a lot more information in it. There's a lot more information in the attribute table. So necessarily, our select by attributes is a little more complex. We talk to this using actual query language like Python, JavaScript, that sort of thing. It's not terribly difficult, and GIS has set up some nice little tools for you. It's giving you some mathematic commands and some character commands. I'm going to have you do a homework that asks a couple of questions about these, the more common ones. And next class, we're going to go over this. But effectively, we're going to learn how to ask questions about the attributes in the attribute table. Instead of looking at the location, we're going to ask what's going on in the attribute table. Next class. Okay, any questions? Concerns? Snide remarks? No? You guys are like the quietest class I've ever had. Are you comfortable with select by location?
Is our homework really due next month?
Next month? I thought I took the date off of it. Oh shit, I printed an old one. Nope, it's not due next month.
Okay, cool.
It's due in a week. Sorry. No, it's due in a week. And I hate to do this to you, but I have to. We have to have another quiz sometime next week. Probably Monday. So I highly recommend do this homework, get it in. Well, I'll probably do it Thursday so I can grade the homework and get it back to you, make sure you actually have the answers, because select by location, select by attributes are going to be on the quiz. Okay? Good? We're done.
That's all I have for you tonight.
Thursday
We're gonna go over this on Thursday,
then. Oh,
but, I mean, well, not the homework specifically, but we're gonna, some of the questions will be answered on Thursday, but it's not due until Monday.
okay.